Hello, my name is Shai and I'm from Tel Aviv, Israel. And today we're going to talk about designing a design system for all platforms. Quickly about myself, my name is Shai, as I said. I'm iOS tech lead for a company called Gett from Israel, an on-demand mobility company. I do a lot of open source work, especially for the Arc Swift project and Arc Swift community, but as well as many other projects. And I'm a long-time international speaker, speaking at many conferences, such as this one, and a huge fan of hackathons, and I even won a few. I'm also an author and editor at raywenderlich.com's iOS team. It's a really nice tutorial website. It has a bunch of Android and Flutter content as well, free content, so check that out if you're interested. First thing you're asking yourself, why did he bring an iOS tech lead to speak at droidCon? And this meme was the best that I could come up with, kind of sneaked into this conference. But really the concepts I'm going to talk to you about today are entirely platform agnostic and serve Android teams, Flutter teams, Ionic teams, iOS teams. So the fact I'm an iOS tech lead has nothing to do with it. But before we get started, just quickly, some of the code I'm going to show you today will be in Swift. It is very similar to Kotlin, and I will explain the code as I go. And all of the concepts, as I mentioned, are mostly platform agnostic. Gett is a leading global on-demand mobility company, and we are pretty distributed. We have teams in Israel, Russia, UK, and the US. The team I work on, though, is the Rider app team, meaning the app that you actually book rides on. We are a very small team. We have 7 iOS, Android, and engineers. We have 2 designers total. We serve hundreds of millions of rides with dozens of screens and hundreds of UI components. And the reason I'm showing you these numbers is to tell you that this entire process of getting designs and getting them to the developers and having this entire process streamlined is super, super crucial to us, which is really the topic of this talk. So what we'll actually talk to you about today. This is basically the story of how we decided to optimize this process, how we decided to improve the synchronization of the design and development teams together so we can overall deliver better looking apps that look as accurate as possible to the design representation. The entire story of this started with basically a huge mess. We had a new redesign of the app coming a couple of years ago. We just ramped up working on this entirely new branding and everything for the new app. But we constantly kept bumping into issues, especially with the design and development cycles of getting designs and getting the work done. These are some of the biggest issues, but there were so many more. These are just the ones I can kind of showcase in a talk. So the first one is communication is super, super hard. It means that if we have a design, and designers would say, hey, can you update the button color to the primary orange color? The developer would basically just say, the app has like 26 different shades of color. I have no idea which shade of color you're referring to. We both cried out a bit. The second problem is that the color reuse was quite problematic. We would have Zeplin specs with designs with these RGB numbers or ARGB for our Android teams. And we would ask ourselves, did we ever use this color in the app before? And when we didn't care enough, developers would just say, okay, I'll just copy paste this for the 1000th time. Looks good to me. Next problem is that the widespread changes were quite hard. This is a really big issue. For example, a designer would often come and say, do you mind trying out a new primary app for primary color for the app from orange to red? And also, I want to change all the titles to 22 points. And I'll be like, sure, I'm just going to manually find and replace the 1,000 of occurrences in the app of that color and font. But of course, it never ends there. The designer would come later and say, I don't really like this red. Can you try a different red, please? And we both kind of burn into flames. Next problem is that the style changes were not synchronized across the platforms. For example, if the designer would say, can you update the button to primary orange? Even if we would have some primary orange naming, it would not be consistent between the platforms. It might have actual different colors behind it because it was very man-made, basically, handmade. The next problem is that the naming across platforms was quite inconsistent. For example, if a color is called primary orange by the design team, it might have entirely different namings across all of our platforms, which is quite a headache. It was much worse with text styles because if we had this Helvetica Neue Light 24-point primary orange color, we had no names. No one knew how to refer to these things, and it was a very manual process. So how can we start solve these problems? Basically, just clean up the mess. Look at all the problems, try to figure out which are the biggest, and start from there. So we decided to go for a design system, and we define it as a shared set of colors, textiles, and other components to be used by all of our teams, design, iOS, Android, and possibly others. We started with our designers because that's the source, basically. They reworked our entire sketch library, had a well-named predefined library where we have named textiles, named colors, and everything figured out well. And that helped designers a lot. But what about us? What about developers and development teams? So what do we want to solve for ourselves? Based on some of the problems I just showcased to you. We want to keep the design and development synchronized always. And we want a single source of truth for all of our colors and textiles and some other resources as well. We want the ability to automatically generate platform-specific code for all of our platforms, iOS, Android, and web. And we also wanted the designers themselves to be able to add a color, for example, and push these changes to the developers easily without developers even being involved in their process. Okay, we can probably do that. But what would be a good single source of truth for design? In our case, as I mentioned before, it's Zeplin. We thought about it a lot, and it made a ton of sense. It's a really good single source of truth, and we already had most of our design delivery happen on it. This is how a screen in Zeplin looks. For example, we could have this label, and if we look at the typeface, we have the font and the size, but it's actually named based on the things we exported from our sketch project. So here it's called head title, and the color also is named. It's not just 38, 50, 56, it's a text main color. So quite useful. And Zeplin takes all of these things and sorts them into a really nice project style guide that looks like this. So all the colors, all the textiles, as you can see, the textile colors are linked to the ones on top as well. So everything is quite well synchronized. So we celebrated saying, hey, we have everything works, everyone are going home, you can finish this talk early, but wait, not so fast. What about the code, right? We wanted to actually generate code from this thing. That didn't prove to be as easy as we thought. We needed some API to fetch styles from Zeplin and generate code through them with some magic in between. And actually, just 6 months ago, Zeplin had no API at all, and we hacked through it with a bunch of weird URLs and weird stuff like that. But today, Zeplin has an API, so this is a bit of a shorter story. We were looking for some existing solutions that already leveraged the APIs and were able to do this, but we really couldn't find anything. But that was an opportunity for us to say, hey, let's just build it ourselves. So to build a tool, we started working on a Swift-based command line tool. Swift is Apple's programming language, and that tool would generate code for the textiles and colors and everything coming from Zeplin API. The reason we chose Swift is just because it's fast, our teams know it well, and it's cross-platform, similarly to Kotlin native, Kotlin multi-platform to those who know it. It supports macOS, Linux, and now it actually also Prism works on Windows. We call the tool Prism, such as the prism where colors and textiles come from one side and code comes from the other side. So to build Prism, we started with a really naive implementation. This is a Swift protocol, kind of like a Kotlin interface. It was very iOS-centric. We had classes that implemented it specifically for iOS. No need to understand this code. Don't worry about it. And we could run the tool, and it would generate this automatic list of colors. Pretty sweet, right? We did the same for textiles as well. We thought it worked really well, but then the Android team saw it and said, hey there, what's going on? We also want to be part of this party. We want to generate Android code as well. This posed a few issues with the existing very simple implementation we had. So we would need to teach our Android developers Swift. That would probably never work for a big team. And every new consumer would need to create this class that implements this protocol or interface and actually make code changes inside the tool. And it would require having a really deep knowledge of that code base. It would also mean that every time you make a change to colors or textiles or whatever, you would need to compile a project, which really didn't make sense. And the style guides were source code files, so they were inside the tool, so changing them would pose quite a few issues. It wasn't a bad solution for a single platform, but when we wanted to expand it to all of our platforms, it was not good enough. Back to the drawing board. We thought and thought and thought. How can we improve Prism? We need some way that would be really flexible and fast, would be really easy to create with no code changes, and that we could host it with each individual app so it could do whatever it wants. And of course, it's always synchronized from a single source of truth. What could that be? So the solution was quite obvious eventually. Templates. Templates are a really good way to provide customizability at the call site. We introduced this very simple stencil-styled template, and it lets you iterate over the colors, textiles, any other assets. You can basically create any output you want now, not just iOS, anything. I'll show you that in a moment. So when you run the Prism tool inside a folder, you will look for a .prism folder with templates, and the templates are files that have the .prism extension, and it will generate the same structure in your output folder, wherever that would be, without the Prism extension, with the template process. Here's how an iOS template would look, for example. We iterate over each of the colors, and for each color, we have the color.identity.camel case. So we have the name of the color, specifically in camel case, because that's the iOS naming convention. And we also have the individual RGB and A color components, because again, that's what iOS needs. When we run the tool, we'll actually get a generated list similar to one we saw earlier. We can do the same with textiles. Again, we have the textile name, camel cased with the font name, font size, and the identity of the color, and that's linked to the same colors we just saw. And running, again, Prism on these would generate all the textiles in iOS. But wait, we just worked so hard on this template engine. We can easily do the same on Android without any hard work, basically. We just make this colors.xml.prism template. For each of the colors, we print out color identity snake case, and here you have a specific Android naming convention. And instead of having RGBA color component, we use ARGB because that's the color convention on Android specifically. So as you can see, it's very, very flexible. When you run the template, the tool, it's going to generate this Android-specific implementation of the code based on the template I just showed you. We can do, again, the same for styles.xml.prism. For every textile, we have textile style identity snake case with a font size, font name, and a snake case identity linked to the same color. Here we had a small problem. Our specific team had a font called graphic Gett -regular, and dashes don't work too well here. So they wanted a name to have it all lowercase and have an underscore instead. So we introduced these pipe transformations. So you can have pipe lowercase, pipe replace dash with underscore, and we just work. And we generate exactly the code you expect. So that's how the file will look. Notice that you have graphic Gett underscore regular. The identities are all specific to Android, body default dark with underscores, and everything is really tidy and nice looking. This really solved our biggest problem. Hey, can you update the label style title medium default dark? The designer would ask, and both teams would say, sure, it's not a problem anymore because title medium default dark now means exactly the same thing in both iOS and Android. They're both generated from the design assets. There's no confusion. We no longer talk about font size, color. We just talk about this encapsulated unit called a textile, which is much, much nicer to work with. But really, we don't have to stop there now that we have templates. Want to make a web page showcasing your style guide? Quite easy. Not the best web developer here, but you can iterate over all of your colors and textiles in a very similar way and just output HTML instead of other pieces of code. You can run it and get this very ugly looking page that at least highlights and showcases your colors and textiles. And every time you run the tool, this is going to be updated along with your other pieces of code. That means you can really make anything that can be represented as a Prism template, meaning a text file basically, Dart code for Flutter or Ionic code or for React styled components. You can basically write anything as a Prism template, run Prism generate, and you would get everything synchronized from this single Zeplin source of truth. So let's review the goals we had and where we are so far. We wanted to communicate the naming of styles and colors, and we achieved that. Everyone are talking in the same language right now. And we have the color and text style reuse because it's not a question anymore. It's named, so we won't miss that. We can easily make a widespread change, take the primary color and just change it to red, and boom, all of your app is red now. Quite easy. It's really flexible, fast, and easy to create using the templates that we introduced, and it doesn't require any code changes to the tool itself. And we are able to host it with each individual app that needs it. We are still not exactly synchronized from a single source of truth, and the designers didn't have the ability to push code themselves. So let's solve this by taking it up to 11 and automate all the things that are left for our use case, at least. So we are really missing the crucial point where we want to automate the entire process of generating code. You would let the designer just update the style guide, somehow run Prism, and that would create pull requests for all of our projects that would run the Prism templates and generate the code and create pull requests as needed. For that, we need some safe environment that could host the Zeplin token, project ID, and other secrets that has access to our GitHub repos so it can generate the code and create a pull request with it. That can build and run Prism. That's pretty flexible. We have macOS, Linux, Windows now as well. And that can be triggered remotely via an API, which is a big portion of what we needed. That all shouts continuous integration. In our specific use case, that's Bitwise, which we've been working with for quite a few years, and we are quite happy with them, and they do all of these things I just mentioned. So we have a custom Bitwise workflow that could just as well be a Jenkins job or any other CI you're working with. We inject the Zeplin token in project ID, clone the project, make a new branch for our changes, run Prism in it, and commit these changes, creating a new pull request using Hub, which is a GitHub CLI tool. It's actually called GH now. And in every step of the process, we are sending a Slack notification when it's starting and when it's succeeding or failed, or when there are no changes to commit. We then wrap this entire process with a tiny status bar icon tool where designers can just make their changes, press one of these options, and that would automatically call the API behind the scenes and run this workflow that does the entire process. So as a quick recap, the designer just updates the style guide and taps this little icon that I just showed you that runs the CI workflow where Bitwise generates the code using Prism, creates a PR, and sends a Slack notification to a dedicated channel. And all the developer has left to do is to review and merge this code, which is basically the most minimal amount of work a developer can do. This is how the Slack notifications look, and this is how a pull request will look. This is like, for example, an iOS pull request with the style guides, text styles from the right and colors from the left. And here is a similar Android pull request with the same content specific to Android. So for us, for Gett, the story of Gett plus Prism has been quite a love story, and it saved us a bunch of hours of work and improved the teamwork and communication, and really reduced the time we spend on handoff and design review. And everyone is just speaking the same language right now when it comes to design, which is super, super great and useful. A few words about the future of Prism from this point. Except for textiles and colors, Zeplin also has this concept called components, which kind of links to symbols and other components in your app. We are currently investigating for a while the possibility of automatically generating entire components, such as buttons, based on the specification. This is a very long and experimental process, but it's an ongoing one. Something nice that is already working is exporting entire icon sets from Zeplin projects for all platforms. So it means you could run Prism, it would export your updated colors, text style, and all of your icons if those were changed. This is already working, experimental on our GitHub repo, so check that out if you're interested in that. We open source Prism just a few months ago, I guess. And it has really extensive documentation and examples, which I'll show you in a moment. And I'll be happy if you check it out. Why won't we do a very quick demo? So I'm going to switch to a terminal here real quickly. I'm in a folder. There's really nothing interesting here. I also have a Zeplin project. This is the Shaker app. It just had an app for shakes. You can see I have iOS and Android counterparts here, and I have a style guide for this specific project. But another nice thing I have specifically for Zeplin is that I can make sort of this structure of style guide. I could have a base style guide for mobile, and then I could have individual iOS and Android style guides, and each of them could add specific things that are only relevant to these specific platforms. So this is how it looks with the color palette, for example, the textiles and everything in between. And again, as I mentioned before, when I go to something like this, for example, I can see that it's a categories blue, for example, or this is a body default gray. Cool, so far so good. Let's start the Prism portion of the demo. So I'm going to run Prism init. That's going to start this wizard, and we are ready to get started. And I'm going to pick a project. So I can just choose the Shaker app, which is the one we have, but it might be nicer to get the style guide itself. So let's start over and do just that. We can do either, depending on our use case. I'm going to pick style guide this time. And here we have the Shaker Android, Shaker iOS, and Shaker Mobile. And I'm going to pick the base Shaker Mobile for the purpose of the demo and use the current folder for the output. All done. If I'm going to run Visual Studio Code, you'll see that we have a configuration file created for us. And now I'm going to copy over some examples, example templates just to save time from the official repo, actually. These are the actual examples that we showcase on GitHub, so you can just watch them and use them as much as you want. We'll just put them inside our .prism folder. I'm gonna just open these up quickly so we see how it looks. So it's quite similar to what we showed you in the presentation, outputting all the colors, the dimensions, the styles. Here we have UIKit and SwiftUI examples for iOS, and we also have JSON output. These are, again, all for kind of experimental purposes and educational purposes. Okay, enough of that. Let's just run Prism Generate now and see what we are getting. All done. You already see some new things here. So the same folder structure in the template folder is now outside, and we don't have the .prism extension anymore. We have files generated with all of our colors, our spacing token, and our styles. And if we go to iOS, you'll see that it looks exactly the same with our specific naming, which is quite useful. And again, JSON would have the same things. So we can go, and if you wanted to, for example, add to our style guide some new spacings, just adding some 8 pixel, 12 pixel, 16 pixel spacing, and run Prism Generate again, you'll see that all of our files are automatically updated based on that single source of truth. And again, this is a very useful process for CI environments, but you can also just run the tool manually if that's what works for you. So that's the end of the demo. With that, let's wrap it up real quickly. So if you have any sources that conflict data-wise, just try to find a single source of truth like we did with Zeplin right here. And if you have some recurring action that wastes a lot of time or creates friction, try to automate it to the best of your ability. If there are no tools to automate it, don't be afraid of building that tool yourself, because actually building developer tooling is quite fun. But don't forget to work with the teams that are actually going to be the consumers of your tool. Otherwise, you're just building something that might not fit the use case. Finally, the open source community is the best community. Since we open sourced Prism, we got a bunch of really good contributions and use cases, and even introduced Windows support, which is quite new. It's been a really awesome journey so far. So to wrap up, thank you so much for listening to me babble here for the past half hour or so. If you have any questions or want to reach out, I'm Freak4PC on Twitter, GitHub, and Facebook. And I'm going to stick around for Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out. Thank you. See you in a moment. First of all, I'm going to answer the 3 questions, but feel free to reach out on Twitter or any other social media options I shared, and I'm happy to discuss your use case and how I can help you. So the top question is, do you think it will be possible to connect Prism with Figma to generate style code? Not so happy with Zeplin, change to Figma. So that's actually something we've investigated. We're mainly users of Zeplin, but we imagine that with the right abstraction, it would be easy to attach any kind of source to this. It's not like a huge priority of us, but it's definitely something we're interested in supporting eventually if Figma has all the right APIs. The next question is, can we specify a different directory for the output files? Yeah, of course, you can specify everything. You can specify the template folder, the output folder, everything. That makes sense, right? Because you would want your styles XML file to be in your res folder or whatever, and not just in the main folder. So it's very customizable. Go to the GitHub repo and you can see all of the various options. If you have questions, just reach out to me. And finally, are there any plans to integrate Prism with Abstract? We're actually in talks with them. The main problem is that Abstract has this thing called Inspect, which is similar to Inspect is quite similar to Zeplin, but it is not as full-featured yet. You can't really have exportable textiles, and we've shared all of our findings with them. They did not have answers yet, but I imagine once they align their API to the standard, we'd be happy to support them as well. And to whoever wrote, thank you for enjoying the talk. How do you handle different size buckets? Like on Android, on small device, you might want a bigger font, in which case you have several demands or style files. So I think in this case, I'm not an Android engineer per se, and we did work on the solution with them. But I imagine in this case, you could have sort of a convention of how the textiles are named, and maybe write the template in a way that would gather them in a size bucket based on that. So I think it's definitely achievable. I think I've answered all the questions. I answered the abstract question. So that should be it. Again, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me a bit later, and enjoy the rest of droidCon. Have fun.